Hope you guys had a good break and you're back ready to get back into the Full Sail groove. I know I am. You know that 2 weeks off is definitely needed from time to time, but definitely ready to get back to it. So what Project and Portfolio 2 is all about is the beginning process to building a level as a team. So the first thing I want to do is give you guys the big picture about what it is that you're going to be doing in this month, as well as Project and Portfolio 3. We're going to talk about that process tonight, as well as just go over some housekeeping things about this class and about myself. So what we're doing here is we're simulating what it's like to work in a studio as a level designer, right? So when you're coming here, when you're coming to work or when you're working on your assignments, whether you're in class or at home, come like you're prepared, like you're coming to work, right? You're coming to a professional environment. So a few of my pet peeves are just people that will come in and fall asleep during class. I know it's late. Your bodies might be adjusting. You may have class at 9 a.m. the other day, but try and do your best to recognize that and get rest when needed, and then come to class and do your work. Because this class can be very intense, but if you spend the time in class or in the lab time working on your assignments, you won't have as much outside work as you would in a very intensive full, 3-day-a-week full day course. So just use your time wisely is what I'm getting at there. Stay away from using profanity, playing games in class. Just come with a professional attitude and you'll be very much successful in this environment. Points in contact for me, FSO message and email are the best ways to get a hold of me. You can use Skype. I'm on Skype pretty often, but it's not as reliable. And lately I've been having a lot of weird issues with my Skype with just random messages. So really stick to FSO message and email, because I do also get an email anytime you send me an FSO message. So that's just the direct, easiest way to contact me. So there's my Skype, there's my email address, and then there's my extension if you want to try and call me on the phone, but not likely as well. So stick to FSO message and email, as well as my office hours that I have. If you noticed today, I sent out an announcement. I'm very proficient on using those. So if you come to your announcements tab here, just be aware of this. Check it at least once the days we have class, or once a day is totally fine. I like to communicate a lot through just this class and all the online sections in one easy to get to place. So feel free to read through these and check these often. You'll see here's the helpful one about Unity Lab if you don't know about that, as well as here's my contact information and my office hours and availability right here. So enough about that. What is it that we're actually doing in here? Why is this a portfolio class? So what you're going to be coming out of this class with, what your portfolio piece is the map that you create at the end of this process. Right here, you're going to create a map inside of Google Draw that's going to be the level you're going to build in future months. But we don't just start you out with just, all right, here's day one, let's make a map, and ready, set, go. No, we put some planning and some pre-production into it before we just go start building it in Unity or right in Google Draw to start. So the first thing we're going to do is just come up with some ideas, right? We're just going to brainstorm, get our concepts down on paper, and then form those into an actual legible document that's short, concise, and tells in a written plan exactly what's going to be included in the level. From there, we move on to creating a level flowchart. So this isn't exactly like the flowchart you made in GD1, but there's a lot of similarities. This is more of how the mechanics are going to flow from one area to the next, how the level is going to flow from interactive point to interactive point, and overall the pacing of the game itself. And then from that flowchart, once you have that plan in place, you build an actual map. So if anyone's ever bought an Prima strategy guide or seen any of the strategy guides that you look up, and it shows out the map laid out with all the icons and where the player needs to go and the exact path you need to take, that's what you're building. That's what you're going to ultimately be designing, is a plan to then take into Unity and then construct in level design. So this month is going to be 100% individual. Right? Everything you're doing here, all of these assignments, is going to be completely individual. But what you want to understand, and what you'll start to see throughout the month when we share the space with Project and Portfolio 3, is this is ending up as a team project. So you're going to be creating individual areas, then you're going to be developing those areas in Unity, and then as a team, collectively, you're going to take all those areas and put them into one level, right? So we're going to be using some of the features of Unity to allow us to cohesively transition from one area to the next without ever seeing any type of break. You know, anyone played, you know, any of the open world games, Assassin's Creed, GTA, that's not all built in one scene. That world isn't just one scene. That's a collective of different scenes that are loading in and out as the player gets close or nearby, right? So that's what we're going to end up doing. Each student is going to have their own scene that you're loading or you're having transition from one to the next fluently. The next thing to keep in mind about this course, just to wrap your head around what is going to be asked of you this month specifically, is that there's two tracks going on at the same time. All right, we have a technical track and we have a creative track. And these are two sets of assignments that will prove to me, as well as yourselves and each other, that you have the skills to actually build this level. Because you may have an awesome plan, a really good design of a level that you want to build, but you don't know how to use Perforce, or you don't know what you're doing in Unity yet. You don't understand scripting, so you can't actually execute your plan. So the creative side is actually coming up with that. What is that level you're building? What is the interaction? What is the player doing in your level? Right? And then the technical track, the other side of things, is proving you can actually build that. You can submit your work to Perforce and write a script and get an executable built and working. So there's two sets of assignments. Pretty often, I think for the most part, all of your creative assignments are going to be due at the beginning of the week, and all of your technical assignments are going to be due at the end. So, for example, your first assignment is going to be due Friday, which is the visuals and project setup. So you're going to set up your project, set up your own project on Perforce, and build a scene provided to you from an image. And then your creative assignment is going to be the brainstorming and the LDD. So that's going to be due the following Monday, so beginning of the week, and then your technicals are always due at the end of the week. All right, any questions at all about any of that information? No? Alrighty, so I'm going to start moving into talking about Perforce itself. So at first, hopefully a lot of this is going to be review, and I understand this is probably not going to be the most interesting topic. It is a little dry, but it's important that you understand this piece of software. So does anybody know why that we're using Perforce, or why you should care to actually learn it?
You don't lose stuff.
So you don't lose information?
You don't lose information or work that's done.
Yeah. Daniel?
So your team can all use so your team can pull from Perforce and everyone shares the same files and documents, basically?
Yeah, so everyone can easily collaborate and easy to get to a place.
Learn how to work long distances, because there's some jobs where contracts and you work away from home and everything else like that.
Yeah, getting contracts. Yeah, working remotely. Definitely a lot of jobs you can get working remotely and then connecting or collaborating across the country. Definitely a lot of good points there. And what it always comes back to is that this is what's being used in the industry. This is what you're going to be using when you get a job. If it's not Perforce, which it probably is going to be, it might be Bitbucket or Git, or any of the next big popular one that's coming out. SourceTree, Mercurial, a lot of the same concepts, right? Just like learning Unity. If you learn Unity, you can take all that knowledge and apply it to Unreal or CryEngine or any other game engine, right? It's the same concept. We're just learning source control. So the reason why we're teaching this is it is a professional tool, that it is complicated, and it's definitely not like using an Xbox or an iPhone or something that's very user-friendly. It takes a lot of prior knowledge to understand what it is you're doing. So when you open up your connection window, this should pop up here, and let's see if that's legible for you guys. So by default, you shouldn't have anything plugged in your server. If you go through the setup, we type this in for you, but I know in Design Tools, you didn't have any server you're actually connecting to, right? You were just setting up a workspace and you were interacting with the interface itself. Now we're actually connecting to a server. And I can actually type that out if that's hard for you to see. So let me come to here. So for all the on-campus, it's gdnperforce.fullsail.edu:1337. And no, that's not on coincidence. Let me really zoom in so you can see it. And this is also in the written instructions. What I'm going to go through today or tonight is basically all the prior setup for the first assignment. So this is in the instructions itself. So that's the server you guys connect to, and for all my online folks, it's the exact same address, but instead of Perforce, it's GDN Resource. All right, so that's your server address for the online students. I'll leave that on the screen. Your user, this is also sent out an announcement today. Your username is the first part of your Full Sail email before the @ sign. So, you know, mine would be A. O'Connor because my email is aoconnor@fullsail.com. So everything before the @ sign is your username. All right. It will, when you go ahead and hit new to create a new workspace, it will prompt you with your password. Right now your password is set to password, and you can easily change that once you get logged in.
What happens if you still have to delete all pre-course and redo everything from scratch?
Good question. If you're taking the class again, if you're already in the class and you have a previous, all you need to do is come and if you have a 1612 or 1611 folder, just delete this folder. You can keep the same workspace, you can keep the same username, just delete last month's content from your computer. All right, so once I've typed in my username and I want to create a workspace, so everyone, you don't have a workspace yet, you want to go ahead and hit new. All right, and now what a workspace is, it's really important that you understand this concept, and this is part where it does get a little dry, but bear with me, this is just a location on your computer. All right, a workspace is just a location, a folder somewhere on your computer that Perforce is going to look at. All right, so something that may not be something you've thought of before is file location, and that pathing is going to matter. Same thing with Unity, right? When you select a folder in Unity, that is the path for your Unity project, right? So it knows to create the assets and the project settings in the library folder all inside of that location. So all we're doing here is setting a location on our computer. You can hit browse if you want to navigate to a certain folder, or you can just come to here, your workspace name, and type it in. So I would just say project. You can name it whatever you'd like. You can do your first name. You can do project 2. Just something that you understand what it is. If you have a certain naming convention you've been using for all your classes, use that. But I think the instructions just say use your first name. And it may be needed to be unique. So I'm going to put the month on it, all right? And then just hit OK. And that'll create a new workspace. Now once you've done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now Perforce should load up. All right, so if you see something that looks like this at first, that's totally okay. So one thing to keep in mind is see up here where you have the depot and the workspace tab, which I'm going to talk about soon. Here I have the actual workspace that I have selected. So make sure the one you created is selected here, and it always is. You have a question?
Yeah, so I'm trying to make a workspace. Does the name and the root have to be the same thing?
The name and the root do have to match. Very good question. So the name is just what it's called, and then the root is the location. So at the end of that path there, you want to have that exact same name. All right, so we make sure you have your workspace here. How's everybody doing? Anyone need help?
Set the workspace and all that, I set the root destination, all that, just trying to get there.
When you try to log in, does it give you any problems?
I'm not sure I know how to log in, to be honest with you. Oh, here we go.
All right, and if anyone from online also has any questions, feel free to, you can try and speak up or just use the chat, and I should see the bubble come up. So feel free, anyone has any problems. At first, you can get logged in, and then you can start to just watch, and then from there, you can follow along with the video archive of it in the lecture or in the lab, or just work through the assignment itself. All right, so when you get set up here, right, make sure you have a workspace selected here. Here is the depot in the workspace, right, and yours should look empty. You shouldn't see anything in here yet, except you should see something in the depot. So anybody want to take a guess or know what the difference is between the depot and the workspace? Daniel?
The depot is what's on your computer, and the workspace is what is on the server. Oh, other way around.
The other way around, yeah. So the depot, this is a shared repository for everybody, right? Everybody will see the exact same thing when you look at the depot, right? You should all see something similar. You won't see as many folders because of your permissions are set up differently, but you should see this IND229 folder and 1701. Everyone should see this exact same thing.
IND229 peer evaluation of scrap assets?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah. Inside of the final project folder. You can hit these little drop-down arrows here to expand the folders. All right, and now the workspace, this is just your local copy. This is your own, again, just a location or a folder structure on your computer. So the first thing that everybody wants to do before anyone starts to add any files is we want to get the latest of this month's folder. All right? So by getting latest revision, what you're doing is copying the files from the depot over to your workspace. All right? So you right-click on the 1701 folder inside IND229, and you're just going to do a get latest revision. So it's telling me I have no files updated because I already have those files, but down below you should see printed, it says some number of files added. All right, and now you look over to the workspace side, you should see this folder structure. Okay? So when I'm going through this, definitely it's going to be a lot of information. I know you that. This is all recorded and archived. But I'm going to be talking about the folder structures of the class for a little bit, and then some of how to actually use Perforce. Okay? So here you see now inside here, if you're online, you'll see different section numbers. You guys, you're the only section, so you're section 0. But if you're section 1, 2, or 3, you'll see that section. And now inside there is compiled and working. Okay? There's these two files, there's two folders for the class. So what's important to understand about these is the working folder. This is where your actual working project, your Unity project that you're going to be working on throughout the month is going to go. I'm not going to go in there and open up your individual project and grade it, but this is for you to get practice with Perforce and Unity in working the two together. So this is where we're going to set up our project. Compiled folder, this is definitely really important, so pay attention to this part. The compiled folder is where your assignments get turned in. All right, so if you look over on the depot, right, you'll see these folders. And now I've gotten the latest and copied those folders to over here. So what you're going to do is when you're ready to turn in your assignments is they get submitted to these folders and then submitted to the depot. Now you're probably wondering yourself, well, why do I have to use this? Why can't I just turn in my assignments on FSO like every other class, like what we've been doing? Well, the reason why is because you're not going to be using FSO when you get a job, right? You're going to be submitting work to here. And this is the first month you're really getting connected and connecting to a depot. So I want you to be spending as much time in here as possible and as little time in FSO as we can, right? Really get comfortable and used to submitting files and seeing this interface. So you'll see here I have everything numbered, 1, 2, 2, 4, 5, 6. If you go over to FSO, this is a good segue, to the activities, everything is labeled the exact same. Right? So everything with this number in front of it These are what you're going to actually be turning into FSO. The ILA assignments, which everybody is familiar with how those work, correct? How ILAs are a part of your attendance? Can you nod and say yes? Okay, cool. I've now announced that. So you have an ILA every day that those are also submitted to FSO. It's the only thing you're submitting to FSO is the ILAs. They're a mixture of discussions and different things, assignments, a few different things throughout the month. Those are the only things you get turned into FSO. But you'll notice how everything here is numbered, right? Starting with just the welcome letter. This is number 0. Starting here, you'll see that everything is open today. So you can, if you really know your stuff or you've taken the class before and you want to work on something later, or you at least want to just see what that thing is, everything is open now. You can work at your own pace. Yes, there's still due dates to set and to make sure you're progressing naturally, but everything is open from the beginning. And if you just start at the top and work your way down, that is your best course of action. And that's why everything is numbered the way it is. And so you just start at the top and work your way down. I wish I could just delete this so you can't even see what it's weighted, because I promise you some of the 0% assignments are very, very important, and they just build onto that actual weighted assignment. So I can tell that based on your LDD if you've actually read the creative vision. It's just very black and white if you've read through that information. So just a little tidbit about that. Start at the top and work your way down, and don't skip anything. Just look at it, even if it's just something to read through it, and then submit it. All right, so you'll see the ones that are weighted are turned in right here to Perforce. That's the segue I was making. All right, so the working folder, this is really where you should be spending a lot of your time. So the first thing you're going to do, all right, and then we're going to talk about some interface stuff. And you'll notice that if your window looks like this, right, you're trying to get this side panel, you just hover over to the right and you'll see your mouse change. You can just click and drag, and now you have this side window here. It's very common to have this open. We're going to use this panel. But the first thing I want to show you guys, to really just reiterate, this is just a location on my computer. All I'm looking at right now is just looking at folders on my computer, is the feature Show in Explorer. So if you haven't used this in Unity, hopefully you start to, because it's really helpful. But then it's the same action here. So Show in Explorer. All this does is open up a file explorer. If you didn't know what this was called, it's called a Finder window on Mac, but it's a file explorer. All this is just a window that shows you this path, right? So you'll see here I have C users, A O'Connor, Perforce, FS Perforce 01. Here's that same thing. C users, A O'Connor, Perforce, FS Perforce, right? It's just opening up this folder path in a window. So now I can click and look, and here's this test file right here. Here's that same test file, right? So what everyone can do, and if you want to follow along with this, feel free. Now that we're inside this working folder, I'm going to create a new folder in here. I'm just going to name this last name, first name. All right? And now you'll see, as soon as I created that, and I see someone already marked this file for delete. What are you doing? Who is it? Phil5711. You've marked the test file for delete. Do you know what to do to fix that?
Yes,
What do you do?
Say Control Z.
Revert unchanged files.
Good question, or good answer. That's the I'll cover that in the future, but it is right. So you'll see as soon as I created that folder, it showed up here in this Explorer, right? All I'm doing is creating a folder inside this folder structure. So in the folder I just created, I'm going to create a new text document. All right, so I'm going to call this last name, first name, contact info. Okay, now in here, I'm just going to add, let's just add my Skype and my email. So you can add this in case your classmates, if you don't have to add your cell phone number, if you don't want your classmates to have it, but it's another place to have contact info for each other, as well as just getting practice. But this should be a review of what you did in design tools, Right, now I created this contact info file. I come back over here and hit the refresh up in the corner. Right, you'll see now there's that contact info. And it's probably difficult to tell, but the icons next to the file, that's how I could tell Philip marked this for delete so quick, as I saw that little blue X next to the file. It's hard to see on the projector, but if you look on your own computer, it's a little bit easier. That's one thing that Perforce does I find better than some of the other version control pieces of software, is those icons can be super helpful. So you'll see that little icon next to the contact info, that's just a little white piece of paper. What that resembles is a file that's not yet on the depot. Right? It's on my workspace, but not on the depot. And if you hover over it, it says that right underneath the file itself. All right, if you need some reference, and I should have it here. This is linked in the first assignment itself when you're setting up Perforce. So I'm not going to read through any of this manual itself, but this really explains even just the introduction about Perforce and what a workspace and depot is if you need refresher. But why I pull this up is about the icons themselves. So about P4V icons, you can do a Google search on this as well. It'll pull it right up. But this would list out every single icon you'll ever see, as well as what it means. So if you see some weird ones you're not used to, it's a good thing to just stop and wait and figure out what it means before you just start panicking or doing something that you start working yourself into a rabbit hole. So review this. You'll see some of these again on the test. But this is a really helpful way to understand the system is through the icons. All right. So now that I've got my file there, right, you'll see that file, I want it in the depot, because I look over here and I don't see anything yet. I see Daniel's got his in here, but I don't have mine yet. So what I need to do is a two-step process, right? First, you need to mark the file for add or put the file into a change list, and then you need to actually submit the change list, okay? So there's a lot of ways to do the same thing in Perforce. So I like to most often just right-click on either the folder or file itself, and this brings up a list of options, right? You'll also see when you select different files, this bar up here will either highlight or de-highlight certain buttons depending on what you're able to do. So it's the same thing. So there's that mark for add. Everything else is listed under this actions window, right? If I look at this list, it's the exact same thing as if I just hit right-click. Right, I get the same list. So I prefer to right-click, and now you'll see that here's this option right here, mark for add. So this isn't adding it to the depot. All this is saying is mark this file for add into the change list. All right, so when I hit add, this window will come up. And no, you cannot type in here. This is not a text box. All this is basically showing you a description if there was one written. So what this window is showing, and you can disable this if you don't want to see it, is basically what change list do you want this to go to. Sometimes you can have multiple lists, but you don't want that. So I'm just going to send it to the default one. There we go. And now it's in this list. All right. So the best analogy I can give you for a change list is think about it as your shopping cart at the grocery store, right? So it's basically a list of instructions you're giving to the computer, right? So think about it as you go to the grocery store, you put things in your shopping cart that you either want to change or buy, right? That's the purpose of them. But nothing is final yet until you actually go to the checkout and pay for everything, right? That's hitting submit. That's the same process as paying for everything, is hitting submit. So you could mess around with something. You could put things in your shopping cart. You could remove something. You could take a bite of something and leave. But it doesn't matter if you don't pay for it, if you don't submit. Okay? So you're just putting things in a list that you're going to submit later on, right? So now that I have this mark for add, I'm going to go ahead and hit submit here. And now this window comes up. And you'll notice, as much as you want to, Perforce will not let you submit it without a description. So don't just write nothing here. I once told a student, okay, just write something in your change list description. This is what he wrote. He literally just wrote, write something. And I know some of these at first that we're doing are very trivial, like you're like, why do I have to write adding contact info? But just get in this habit. Like a lot of this month is just building up habits and understanding that, yes, we're doing some basic things at first, but you will be changing scripts and adjusting movement speed, and what you're changing is actually going to matter in this long list of history. All right, so I'm just adding my contact info. And now you'll see that the icon changed to now it's a small little icon with a green dot, as well as the log down here said that one file is added. So now you'll see if I look over in the depot, I should see my file as well as everybody else that has been adding theirs alongside me. So one thing I'm going to do now is I want to get everybody's contact info because I want to have that information on my computer. So I'm just going to come to working and get latest revision. Again, this is just copying the files over to my computer. There's a bunch more. Did I get them all? All right, cool. So I'm going to utilize the Show in Explorer feature, and if you start to utilize this a lot, which you should, you can start to use the hotkey, which is Control-Shift-S. And that just pops up a window, and now I have all these folders on here. All right. So one thing to pay attention to with this month is that you'll notice that everybody can freely edit everything in this folder. So yes, you can step on each other's toes, but it's all going to be listed and recorded in the History tab. So, don't be malicious about it. You're doing this to be professional. But understand that if you're affecting something in here, it can have an impact. So be conscious of what it is you're changing. So just as an example, because I see this all the time, go ahead and get latest one more time to make sure I have everybody's. I'll come to the class and realize, oh crap, I don't need everybody's. I just wanted mine, right? So very often you're like, oh, I don't need everybody's. Let me just come over here and I'm just going to mark out this for delete because I don't want it on my computer anymore, right? I'm just going to delete it off of my computer. So this is something that Philip had did, right? He maybe marked this for delete or gotten several files that he didn't want to get. So you think by doing this, you're just deleting it off the computer. But if you look at your depot right now, you'll see that you can tell that I have these files marked for delete. So that isn't what you want to do. When you come to Perforce, if you're marking for add, marking for delete, or checking out, you're making changes to the files on the depot. So if you ever make a mistake, you got a question?
So how do you get to the workspace itself? Do you go through the root command and then you delete the workspace in your computer through the...
Yeah, you just delete the files individually off the computer. So I'll show that right here. So you'll see right now, if I hit submit, this is going to submit the files, submit the changes to the depot, which we can still get them back. It's just a hassle. So you'll see when you select the change list itself, here's that submit option, as well as view, and right here, revert files and revert unchanged files. This is the one you're going to utilize. It's basically your undo button, right, or your Control Z. So revert files, which you should understand that one first. This is just going to pull everything out of the change list. So it's saying all those, this is like just leaving your shopping cart in the store and walking out, all right, putting all the groceries back and just leaving. You're not buying anything. All right, so I'm just going to revert files. This is going to pull everything out. This is going to tell me, which files do you want to revert, if you want to do some or all, and then you just hit revert, and now it just pulls them out of the change list. All right, so if I do, they're no longer marked for delete, right? I didn't actually change or submit anything. So if I do want to actually delete them from my computer, I just come to my computer and delete them. All right, say, oh, I didn't want everybody's, I just want mine, right? So there is that. So now I come back to the workspace side and hit refresh. This will match what I see here, right? Here's just my folder and then these two text files. So this leads to another good point. Let me see if anyone else has added. Doesn't look like it. So now I do a get latest revision, and it added a few files. But notice now if I do get latest, it's going to keep telling me no files updated. But I look at the workspace, and I don't have everybody's, right? So this is where this 1 of 1 comes into play, right? This shows you the version number of each file on Perforce, right? That 1 of 1 tells me that I have the most recent file. Otherwise, it would be 0 of 1, right? As well as the icon can also tell me that I have the most recent revision. So no matter what, when I do a get latest revision, nothing's updating because Perforce thinks I have these files. So one way to get around this is a get revision. Right below get latest revision is get revision with the 3 dots. All right, I'm going to select this, and this options come up, right? So in this options, I want to select the force operation. What this does is, right here in parentheses explains it, it's going to replace every single file even if you already have that specified revision. So this is just telling Perforce, copy everything again, even if you think I have a recent version. This is a really good way to test your own work. You can submit something to the depot and then do a get revision and force operation, and you're pulling exactly what's on the depot to test and make sure what you have on the depot is working. Just another little helpful piece of information, you can specify a revision based on a date or time or a revision number. So if you do a date or time, like I know my project was working Friday at 3 o'clock, so you can put in that date and that time and get the revision based on the state it was in at a certain time. All right, so now when I do the get revision, it'll tell me that's 13 files updated. So now I look back over here and I should see all of those files again. All right. So a little bit about this window here. All of this is accessed through view, right? So if you don't see any of this, you can close all these, right? So now I just don't have that open panel. You can go to view, and then here's all those different windows you can possibly have open. I highly recommend having history opened. I also highly recommend pending change lists. And I think by default they have files in folder open, but not super useful all the time. But pending and history are good to have open and feel comfortable with. And a little bit about this window. If it looks something like this, it's all crazy, where you see every single change list by every single user that's active on the server, and we have like I think a few thousand students on here. You'll see everything. This is chaos. So instead, you want to use this filter, which it might be minimized. So you open this up, you have user, and then you could type in your user or just select current user, and then workspace, current workspace. So that might bring the question, like, does that mean I can have multiple workspaces as one user? Yes, you can. So you could have multiple on your own computer, but that's not as realistic as, say, having one workspace on your laptop and maybe you have a desktop at home that you like to work on. You can have, you can access this on any computer. You don't have to be on Full Sail's network. This is accessed through anywhere. And you can have multiple different computers access it. Each workspace will have to be unique, right? So if you named this one Bobby1 for your workspace for your laptop, that name is now taken. You can't have any other workspace now named Bobby1. You have to name Bobby2 or something different, right? For each computer, each device will have a unique workspace. All right. So a little bit more about the course itself. So inside your section is where all your work is going to go. Down here you see this IND229 content folder. Let me go to the depot side. All right, this is where several assignments as well as examples and resources are located for you. So you can feel free and just do a get latest revision on that folder. It's not too big. You should be able to copy that pretty quickly. I think the biggest thing is probably these example gold builds. Those are pretty large. And then also the other folder you guys should have access to now is the Scraps Assets. Okay? So inside Scraps Assets, there's 2 folders for you. Definitely pay attention to this because this is getting into actually setting up our project. We have our project template and the Scraps Asset Depot. So before I actually do anything, I'm going to describe what these folders are. So the project template, anyone want to take a guess? It's a template of a project, right? So this is your Unity project ready to go, right? You're just going to rename that folder and open this as your Unity project. So all month long, you're going to be working out of this one project that we're going to set up. So you don't need to create anything new. Everything has been given to you to start designing. The Scraps Asset Depot. This is a series and collection of all Unity packages. This is something you should start to familiarize yourself with. We try and add to this as often as we can. And these are just assets that are available to you, so you're not spending your time either making your own or browsing the internet looking for assets. We want you to be focusing on the gameplay and the design, and then you can add in assets after the fact. So the very first folder, right here, it's called Asset Demo EXE. This is something completely separate. This basically just shows you all the assets that we have built for you in just one easy to get to scene. So this is more of just like a preview mode, so you can walk around here and get a feel for the assets before you actually download and import them. All right, so you can use G to go into ghost mode, and you can fly around and look at these. And then obviously they're named accordingly. So this, it's not like a big sign, but obviously this is, wooden fence. Here is, metal fence. The names will match up pretty easily, but this way you can just at least preview them all before you import them. So I know several people will be tempted to just import everything because they can, but obviously that's a lot of information and a lot of data. So just only import what you need for the assignments and the level you build. All right, so the project template. Let's get to this now. So what you're going to be doing, and you can definitely go ahead and just do a get latest revision on the project template itself. The Asset Depot is a few gigs of data, so you may want to either do it at some other point or at least prepare yourself to be able to walk away from your computer while it's copying everything. But the project template, and if you're retaking this class, I highly recommend you go to Show and Explore and just delete this completely. Just delete your project template altogether, and then do, again, why I showed you the get revision, and do the force operation to copy everything fresh. We've made some significant changes to the character as well as some of the other assets in the project, so it's a good thing to just start fresh this month. So let me delete this. So now once you get the latest on the project template, right, and you have it in your file explorer here, you'll see that we provided you with just the assets in the project settings. And if you saw quick how I deleted that library folder, there's several folders that make up an actual Unity project. And I'll explain why we want some on the depot and others not moving forward, right? But this base project template that we give you is just the assets and project settings. So once you have it copied over, this is the process you want to go through to set this up. So don't make this harder on yourselves than it needs to be. This is very straightforward. All we're going to do is select the project template and copy it. That's all I'm doing, just copy. All right. Now I'm going to go navigate back to my own folder, right? Here's my working folder. So here's me, Andrew O'Connor, and I'm going to paste my project template. That's all I'm doing, copy and paste. Don't cut it. Don't try and open it in Unity and work in that folder. Move it to your folder we just created, right? The folder we just created, that is where your project is going to go.
Is that the project template a little behind?
Yeah, the project template itself. So I'm just going to name this last name, first name, project. You can name it, project in portfolio 2 or just something other than project template. You're just going to get yourself confused. Everyone's still copying it. That's okay. It might take a little bit where we're at now. I just want to demonstrate the process. And again, it's in written form, so you can get just reiterate the same mechanics.
To prevent more confusion, can we delete the older version, the copied version?
Yeah.
the version that we import, can we delete that off our workspace?
Once you have it set up, yeah, you can if you want to. You can anytime delete your folders off here and then just do a get revision and force operation to copy it
So,
over again if you need
we
it.
made this revision of the project template. We open it up in the window.
Yep.
We copy it. Then
Yeah.
Then we go to our file.
Your folder you created and paste it inside there.
Go to the workplace. Find my name. I show in the store. Here I am in the workspace.
Yep.
Pasting. Copy. Pasting.
Yep. And now once you've pasted in there and renamed it, you should be able to come back to the workspace again and refresh and see the project. Right? So there is my project.
Unity template, I guess. So I have to add this class name.
Yeah, or last name, first name, and then the class name. That's what I'm going to cover right now. So once you have yours in there, and if you're not to the point where we're at right now, it's okay. We're about to take a short little break so you can get caught up if you'd like. I'm just going to show you the process of actually adding it to the depot because I recommend adding it before you actually open it in Unity. Not a big deal, but you'll see what happens when we do so. So we have these assets and project settings folders that we want to add to the depot. So you can right-click and do a mark for add. Another way, you may see this in the instructions, is you can actually drag and drop into a change list. So you can't just drop into this window, but if you go over the change list itself, you can drag the file and it will mark them for add. All right, so the next process you want to do, and there it is, 500 files open for add, as well as project settings. There's all my files now marked for add. But notice we only have the assets and project settings. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. So adding. Now this may take a minute to submit. And anytime you have Perforce like this, really the only way to know your progress on an upload is this little blue bar down here. When you do a get, when you're downloading files, they'll have a big window that will show you your progress. But if you see this blue bar, it just means it's working. And let it do its thing. Then this window will stay open. So once this is on the depot, one really awesome way I like to actually open a Unity project is right through the Perforce interface. So you can open Unity, just load Unity and then select the folder you want to. But if you look inside the assets folder, you'll see inside the scenes we have some scenes in here. So the one called hub.unity. I'm just going to double click on this. Right? And now Unity is just going to load, and now it's telling us the project was saved in an older version. Just hit continue. Try and get rid of that. Right, and now the project is actually loading. It's building the project. So if I look now in the project, look at these other files that were created, right? Here's this library folder and this temp folder. All right? So these weren't here before, but when I launched the project, these were just dynamically created by Unity. So you don't need to know what these files do. You look, there's a lot of stuff in here. These metadata files, there's just a lot of who knows what this stuff is. But what you do need to understand is that these folders cannot be on the depot. So what's going on with this is Unity is going to be trying to change these library files and these temp files constantly. Not constantly, but it makes changes as you make changes in the editor as you're working. So with Perforce is going to mark these files as read-only. And I can actually show you that right here. In my contact info, if I show this in Explorer, that's bizarre. All right, so if I show this in Explorer and look at the properties of this file, and I know this is not very exciting, But look, this file is marked as read-only, right? So basically what this means is the computer doesn't want this file changed right now. It's just, this is not writable. This is marked as read-only. So when I come to this file and check it out, notice I check out the file. It goes into my change list now. Here's that contact info. If I look at the properties again of this, right, it's checked off, right? Now this file is writable, so I can make changes. So now I could very easily, double click on this. Let me add my extension, which you should never call, and I'll save this. And now I'll submit, right? I modified a file on the depot, right? I'm just going to say adding extension. Now this shows version 2 of 2. Right, so that should definitely be a part of a refresher too, of checking something out, making a change, and submitting it. So back to the library, you'll notice that these are going to be constantly changed. So if I submit these to the depot, they're going to be marked as read-only. So Unity is going to try and make a change. Purport is going to be like, no, those files are marked as read-only, and then Unity is just going to crash. So you would think, okay, well, I can just submit them to the depot and then check them out while I'm working. But that isn't actually how it works. And the same thing goes, everything I'm saying is the same thing for the temp folder as well, is that these files are unique to each instance of Unity and each version or each computer, right? Each IP address carries its own library. So even if you share them, everyone working on the project would have to have a different library folder. So the best way to do it is you just don't have them on the depot. So they should be on your computer. That's totally fine. But you only ever want your assets and project settings on Perforce itself. And you'll see this come up sometime through the month. Maybe you accidentally mark it for add. It's totally okay to, at any point, just delete this folder off your computer. When you open up Unity again, it's just going to recreate itself. So at any point, you're free to just remove that and then let it reload. Alrighty, any questions at all so far about what we've covered, about getting the project set up and getting to this point? We can take a short break. Not here. All right, we're going to take a short break right now. So it's 6:05 right now. We'll take a 15-minute break, so if you want to step out or use the bathroom, we'll continue at 6:20, and we're going to go over some of the requirements for the first assignment. Alrighty, so again, just one way I like to open up the project itself once you have it on the depot is you can just come to the scenes file here and double click right on the hub or any scene. This will load the project. Just a good way to make sure you're working in the correct project and not to, drag the project into your assets or do anything crazy. Just a good way to load the project itself. Also, to keep in mind, this should be something you've probably knew but didn't really see an importance for, but now, if you have multiple projects, it's important to understand this quick reference. Here, this shows you what scene is open, right? Hub.unity is the name of the scene. And this, right after this is the name of the project. So if you're looking here and this says project template, you're probably in the wrong project. So make sure the project you just created is labeled right here. Okay? So again, if you were in this class before, you can tell this is a very different, new and improved hub scene. So first, the question? No? First thing I'm going to do is just play, just to showcase a little bit of what we've provided for you. This is what you're going to be designing for. So you'll read more about the Creative Vision tonight in Scraps and what Scraps is all about. But this is a working little demonstration of some of the things you'll be able to accomplish and what has been provided for you. So here's an example of an objective system working. You can collect 4 pieces of scrap to complete the objective. And this is just showcasing the level blocking tools as well as the character and what has been given to you, as well as this grav null. Right, so I can click with the mouse and I can pick up certain objects and right click to throw them. Again, this is what you're going to be designing your level for. So you're not going to be creating your own game. We've been giving you a game template and now you're designing a level that fits within these small parameters. So we're definitely streamlining you to make sure you're successful. All right. So first thing I want to go over is the level blocking tools. So this is a pretty big tool that I want to make sure I give enough time for. All right. So one thing you'll see in the project, it's really the only thing that's custom to this project itself, is you'll see that this inside the scenes folder is the IND229 folder, as well as the student name folder. All right. So inside IND229, these are several scenes in here that you're going to be working on your assignments, right? Here is IND2 entryway, rigid bodies, visuals, and wind turbine. Some of these are experiments, some of these are actual assignments, but here they are for you that you're going to be creating content in them. So no need to create any new projects, new scenes. Everything is here for you. You're just making changes to them. All right, so now you'll see I have the hub scene open. And if you're not familiar with Unity's multi-scene editing, we're going to do a little bit of that this month. Right? So this was new in Unity 5.3. I think it was about the beginning of 2015 or maybe late 2015. This was first a big addition, and it's a huge, tremendous help. So if you're not familiar with what it does, is it allows you to edit multiple scenes at one time. So with the hub scene open, I can just drag the visuals scene and drop it into the hierarchy, right? Now you'll see these two little drop-down menus. These represent different scenes, right? This visual scene itself is very simple. It's just, just a small little platform for you to build your content on. But that's all the scene is. But now you'll see I'm very easy. I can select something in this scene and then select something in the other scene and move them very quickly and efficiently, rather than having to close and save one, open the other. You'd have to even also like remember or write down the positions, open up the other scene, type in that position, see if they line up. If they don't, you have to adjust it. God bless you. So it's just much easier now when you can just visually see them together. All right? So to actually work on one scene over the other, it's called setting the active scene. So you want to right-click on the scene itself and then set active, right? And when you do this, you'll see that it changes from the lighting will change based on whatever that scene is set to, as well as you'll see in the hierarchy, it changes from bold to just regular text. So now IND2_visuals is the active scene, so it is bold. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do before I actually start working, and again, this is all about forming habits, is I'm going to come to Perforce and actually check out the thing that I want to change. Right now, all I'm going to be doing is making changes to this scene, IND2_visuals. So I'm going to come over here and then just check out IND2_visuals. And then you'll see next to this, you're wondering what these are. So this is the same exact file, IND2_visuals.unity, and then it has .meta at the end. All right, and if you're not familiar with these, every single asset in Unity, even folders, so here is like IND229.meta. This is the actual folder, has a meta file. What these hold are all the dependencies for that actual file. So some of the binary files, like a scene file and a script, they don't actually matter all that much, but a prefab, for example, is a really good usage of why a meta file is important and why things can go wrong, right? So a prefab, that can be a collection of multiple things, right? It has an audio source that has a sound clip that's somewhere in the project. It has a material on it that's somewhere in the project. It has a texture that's on that material that's in the project. There's an asset that's actually visually represented that's in the project. And all those locations, again, file locations actually important, all those locations need to be accounted for, and that's held in the meta file. So if you load up an asset and you see that the texture is pink, but it looks fine in the editor, it's probably the meta file. It hasn't been submitted properly to Perforce. So just a good habit to get into to never run into that issue is if you're working on something, just check out the meta file with the asset itself. So I'm just going to check out the scene as well as the meta file, and now come back to Perforce, or come back to Unity and start working. All right? So you'll see in your project that you see this top list of tools down here. Here's one that's level blocking meshes. So this isn't something default with Unity. No, this is not new in Unity 5.5. This has been built by instructors here at Full Sail that you may have gotten a little sneak peek of in Project and Portfolio 1. So, so I'm going to go ahead and create a level blocking mesh here, as well as I'm going to create a Unity primitive. Let me make this as big as I possibly can. All right, so I got that, and I'm also going to create a Unity primitive just so you can see the difference and understand why one is way better than the other. All right, so by default, you'll see the level blocking meshes come in with this material on them. It's our utility grid material that we have built for you and ready to go. All right, so one thing you also notice about the level blocking meshes, and I'm just going to start with a cube because it's the easiest to explain, but all of this will apply to all of the different types. You'll see this little pink ball on the asset itself, right, or on the object. So if I select this ball right here, you'll see another little widget comes up, another little gizmo, and now I can start to move this back and forth. And what I'm actually doing when I'm changing this, if you look in the transforms here, is I'm changing the scale values of the object. So as I move this, I'm actually just scaling it, right? It's the same thing of just selecting scale and moving it. But it's just very easy and efficient to be able to get this to the size you want it in any direction quickly. So it's just an added benefit to be able to control that. Another thing you want to start to think about if you're not using it already is snapping. So if you hold down Control when you're moving in Unity, you see how it will snap on those increments. And to change that, you can go to Edit Snap Settings. In this small little window here, I don't think 0.5 is the default. I'm pretty sure it's 1. And then scale is 0.1 maybe. And I'm not sure what rotation is, but you can start there and obviously work your way down, right? If you're working on large blockouts of levels, having it at 1 or 2 is probably pretty good, but if you're working on smaller details, don't be afraid to adjust it, right? But now when I hold down Control, it will snap on the 1 unit increments. All right, same thing that goes for scale and rotation. Let's see, sorry, it's back. And as well as the snap on axes is also really helpful because say you start out and your block is something like this where you've got all these decimal points, which right now you're probably like, oh, what's the big deal? I can just leave it like that. There's no way I can actually tell. But when you actually get to start things where you're adding those values or subtracting from these other, and there's just a lot more math that goes into that if you're like moving or animating an object, it just becomes a lot more of a headache. So it's a good idea to just work in whole numbers or numbers that are easier for us to recognize and work with than these long decimal points. So if you get something like this, you can use this snap all axes and it'll just round it to the next highest value. So it's a good way to get back on track. And you'll see it too in either your peers' work or your own work. You start to reflect and see when you don't snap things together, you can just tell that there's these small little gaps and things are just off and it just doesn't look as professional. So just get in the habit of using that control. Control is to snap. All right, so you'll see, let me go ahead and put the same grid material on our cube here. Because you'll see what's really nice and really what comes down to why these tools are so awesome, besides some of the awesome shapes we get, are the ability to tile the texture like this, right? So as I make this object bigger or smaller, the texture is just repeating itself. And why this is happening is the UVs of the object, which we can talk about a little bit more later on if anyone's interested, which really represent the mapping of the texture itself onto the object. So it's repeating itself, allowing us to actually make a brick wall that looks how we want it to. But now if I go ahead and say here's this is the Unity primitive now. Don't get confused because they're textured the same. If I want to make this similar size object, look what happens to the texture, right? It's not changing the UVs, and it's just conforming that texture to the object, no matter what size it is, right? So yes, you can fix this. So I could come into the material and then start to change the tiling. No, I always do that. It's this tiling, right? Now I can all right, well, I can make this look better. There we go, that looks good. But now what you'll notice is if I want to have another object with the same material, I need to have a duplicate version of that material, right? If I want to have this same wall, but this one's 5 units long or 6 units long, now I would have to come in here and adjust this material, and notice it's changing them for both. So you're starting to work yourself into this corner, and this is part of just an issue with some of Unity's primitives. They're not meant to be, game assets. Is that you'll have to create multiple instances of this material, and you don't want that. So what the Unity or the level blocking methods provide is that it's just going to tile itself no matter how big or small it is. All right. So some other things, some other shapes that are really helpful that are often used are definitely the wedge. So we've got the wedge in and out, but here's just the default wedge. There we go. Right, so this is basically just a small triangle shape, half a cube, that again, all these have this little pink ball on them that you can adjust the size with. So this is a really, really helpful shape that you can also just use as collision, right? So if you just turn off the renderer, right, this could be your collider for a stairs, right? You have your actual visual stairs, but then here's your collision. So this is just a really nice shape that can fill in a lot of gaps. All right, a lot of these are self-explanatory. I will talk about the arch, though, because the arch is pretty cool and has a lot of customization to it. So by default, it starts as the small little pipe or half pipe. But if you look on the game object itself, right, here's this level blocking mesh arch. It's actually a script on this object. In here, we have a lot of different controls and attributes that we can adjust. So the first one, I'll talk about the texture, positioning, and tiling in a second here. But this is squared or rounded, right? So obviously you can make it squared if you wanted to fit in the doorway and make a little entryway, or rounded could be something as like a pipe on the wall, or a pipe that the player walks through, or something with a more cylindrical shape. Okay, sections, this controls how many actual sections around it is. So if we change this to 10, it's going to get a lot smoother. And obviously if we just do 1, there's just one section there. The radius, this is going to control the distance between the center point and the starting point of your arch. So 0.5, let's try 1. See how it's getting larger. The arch itself is getting bigger. Now let's go ahead and add a few more of these in. All right, so now it's a little bit larger. So the start and bend angle, this is basically controlling how big it is. So 0 to 180, that's why it's only half as big. So if we go a full 360, right, it's going to be a full shape, right? This could be something the player drops into, or again, walks through. A lot of different things that you could go with from here. And then, so if, say you want it to be 3/4, right, you start at 90. No, I think we just want to go 0 to 270. There we go. So you can really change this to whatever shape you want. And be careful with these sliders. This is really the only one that works well. Obviously the one at the radius, because it's such a large range, this slider can really, it can just get crazy so fast. So it's hard to use a lot of these. So just get in the habit of just inputting values. All right. And then width, this is the overall actual thickness of the arch itself, right? So this doesn't change the the size of the arch, just the overall thickness of the shape. All right, so when you're working on these and you're working with these primitives, because this is what you're going to be spending a lot of your time on, definitely when you get to level design, is the overall just block out of the level. So just be careful with how you're using your geometry. And a little bit about me is I'm an artist. I went through the game art program, so I come more from an art perspective and learning design and scripting as I go, for sure. But just a little bit of knowledge to think about is when you can see these points here, this is called faceting. When you can see the geometry and where it's bending like this, is a bad thing, right? You want to avoid this, but there's still a balance to how much you want to use, right? So if I make this 20 sides around and then make this one, let's say 100, you can really tell that there isn't much of a difference there, right? So you still want to be efficient and use your geometry as effectively as possible to allow to put where you need a lot more to include more. So obviously if this was something, let's make this a bit smaller. Right, so if this was like a pipe on the wall, and then this one here is something that the player actually like walks through. Maybe 4. Right, say you have like a long pipe or something here that the player is actually walking through. Obviously you'd want to put more resources into this one than you do to the small one here. So this one you may want to get away with like 30. And then this one is still at 100 when we can put this to like 7 or 8, maybe 8, right? That still serves the same purpose. It's all about the size of the object and where you're putting your density, right? You don't need something small that's, 100 sides or even 20 sides around. You're not gaining anything from that.
That's all like to save resources, right?
Exactly, yeah. You're just trying to be effective. So when you start to see a slowdown or you start to see issues, it may be that you're just putting too much density into objects that don't matter. So just play with some of these. Familiarize yourselves with the different shapes. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. The slope is just like the arch, except it's just more of a ramp, not like a triangle. And let me go ahead and pull up this resource. So if you're not familiar with this website, textures.com, used to be called CG Textures, but this is a really, really awesome website that is basically free. You do have to create an account, but it's free to sign up. All you need is a email address, and basically when you sign in, oh man, I always do bad at these. Pretty much once you sign in, you get, there we go, you get 15 free downloads every day. You get 15 credits, right? So you can come to these different categories and say you want to go to concrete, right? Here is 322 bare concrete textures that you can pick from. So by getting 15 free credits a day, that allows you to download 15 different textures per day. So if you do that for a few months or, while you're a student at Full Sail, by the end of it, you end up with a very large texture database that you can utilize.
Is this website affiliated with Full Sail?
No, this is just completely free to use. You can use any of these.
Guys that upload textures for free?
Yeah, this is what these guys do. They've gotten into, I'll talk about this in a second, but they've gotten into more 3D scanning and 3D brushes. But any of these textures that you select, feel free to hit this little preview button and actually get a sense of what does this look like when I put it on the wall. You'll notice, like, yeah, there's a bunch of textures on here, and yeah, they're free, but they're not all necessarily great, right? Like, I mean, as an artist, I'll see that this little indent here, this sticks out like a sore thumb, right? You just see that same thing over and over again. So just be conscious of what it is you're actually choosing. Don't just like, oh, concrete, there's the first one. Let me just select that and download it. Actually look at them and get a feel for what is it going to look like when you put it on the floor or on the wall. because they'll all tell you here when it says seamless, that means that it's going to tile, right? It's going to repeat without seeing any seams. And then right here you can just download it, and that's really good. A 1024 by 1024 for 1 credit. You can download it, and now it's on your computer, right? So once you download those, you obviously want to bring them to your project. So in my project window here, you really want to stay organized as best you can. So I don't have a this is what you do, this is step by step how you do it, but you want to stay organized. So what I recommend doing is I'm just going to come to the assets folder. I'm just going to create a new folder in here. I like to just create a folder, or recommend you guys create a folder for each assignment that you're working on to keep yourselves organized to understand Perforce. So I just created a visuals folder. This is going to be everything for my visuals assignment. I'm going to take this texture I downloaded, and I'm going to be bad and not rename it for time's sake, and add it to this folder, right? You're going to just drag and drop and put it right in there. Now this file is now in this location. If I come to Perforce real quickly, I refresh, there's my visuals, there's that texture, as well as the meta file, right? So that's where that file is now located, right? I can also create a material. Let's just call this tests concrete. All right, and you guys assign this to the albedo. Oh. Okay, and now I can start to apply this onto different objects. Okay, I also have some on my computer. Let me grab them real quick. These two. All right, so I have these 2 brick textures that I also got from that website. So I'm just going to create 2 materials. So this is brick 01 and brick 02. Perfect. So now this one, I'm going to put that brick texture. This one, I got this brick texture. All right, so when you're actually creating objects and then putting textures on them, it's not going to be perfect the first time you put it on. So I'm going to put this texture on here, and I download these 2 different brick textures to showcase a point that some of the textures that you find are meant to tile in one direction. What I mean by that is, see this one here, how this could go in the X direction, left and right, and in the Y infinitely, and it would still tile, right? You would never see any seams. Right, this could be as big or as small as you want, and it's never going to see any seams. This one here, this is meant to tile in one direction, right? It's tile in the X, right? So you'll have this basically will infinitely go this way as long as you want to, right? But if you do this, you'll see I like to call this candy caning or striping, right? Because you just see this is supposed to be the bottom of the wall, and this is the top, right? To adjust this, and we've done this by using the level blocking meshes, down here, and all of these have it, but the cube is the simplest, is you have this texture position and tiling. So the positioning, you can actually physically move it, right, if you want to like move it left or right. And then the tiling is how you can control each asset individually if you want it to adjust, right? Rather than just changing the material, we can change the tiling attribute on the object itself. So a good rule of thumb is, let's see, I scaled this 3 in the Y, right? So what we want to put in for the tiling value is the inverse, right? So a third. So we want to put in 0.333 and then 0.333, right? And now it'll fit perfectly to that size of the object, right? Now I can make this as big as small as I want. So if you make this half, right, 2, you change this to 0.5. And a lot of this is just trial and error, right? It might look good here, but then what you want to do is actually play with the character and run up to it and see what looks good with the character next to it, right? Because it may look good in the editor. We can work on the lighting, but we don't want anything massive that doesn't look correct, right? We want it to fit within the scale of the character itself. So a good way to do that is just making a bunch of them. So just duplicate one or two and then changing this, right? So this one can be set to 1. We can change this one to 0.5. Right? And then just rinse, repeat. Make one 2 and find the one that actually fits with what you want to be creating. So what you're going to be actually doing with your assignment is you're going to be recreating an image given to you. So I know in PNP 1 you guys were just told to create a scene, anything that you want. Here we've given you we've provided something for you. So you're going to take this image given to you and use pretty much only the level blocking meshes, and you can use some assets if you like, but that's not important. It's really just meant to use the level blocking meshes as much as possible to recreate this image, right? Once you focus on just getting the structures and the objects in place, then worry about actually putting textures and materials on things. Then after that, you can get your lighting in place. But really the first thing I want to see this is just a gauge of where your skills are at right now. So I'm not expecting people to start modeling dumpsters and getting this picture perfect. I'm just looking at your overall scale and your placement of your objects and just familiarizing yourself with these skill sets. So don't feel intimidated by this. I just want to see where everybody's at and then just give it your best effort to try and recreate this as best as you can. All right? So you'll be doing that all in this scene, right? This IND2 visuals scene right here that you'll be working in. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So it's a really good habit to get into, to check out your scene, work on it for a little while, and then come back to Perforce and submit it. Just in case something goes wrong, you have this backup copy, right? Your computer crashes, Unity crashes, your graphics card just fails, water gets spilled on your computer, anything could happen. I don't want to be this pessimist, but by using this, you're preventing any of those things from ever affecting you, right? If you submit it to Perforce, it doesn't matter what happens because you can get your work back, right? I can help you get your work back if you submit it. If you don't, and you come to me and say, I just lost a whole week's worth of work, there's not a lot I can do. But if you submit it, there's a lot more avenues we can take. So here's my scene I had checked out, and here's all my stuff for my visuals. Here's some materials I made and the textures I downloaded. I'm just going to mark this for add. So here you'll notice you can have a change list that's a bunch of files marked for add and something that's checked out. And I'm just going to submit it. I'm just going to say adding textures for my visuals assignment. And just be descriptive. Whatever it is you're actually doing, submit that in your change list, because then you'll see, do its thing, the history will show you exactly that list. So you'll see a big long list and you'll need to go back to a certain one. It'll be helpful in the future. All right, so the last thing I'm going to cover before we go to break, so just bear with me, is how to actually make an executable, which at this point you should have done before, I hope. Are we attaching it to the hub scene or just, so that was I think that was a relevant question. They're all relevant, but this is what I'm about to directly talk about. Are we attaching it to the hub scene or just use the visual scene to make the picture? All right, so that's a good question. You're going to need the character itself. You're going to need the character for testing this and actually submitting. So while you're working, if you want to remove this scene or unload it and just work like this, that's totally fine. That can be how you're working. But when you're actually going to play, or when you're going to turn this in, you're going to be turning an executable of this, which is the hub right here, as well as your scene that you've included. So I'll walk onto your platform and see the scene you've created. I do know the instructions, and I'll modify the instructions slightly, but if anyone that works on that, you may want to do this yourself. Is in the other scene, I used to have a small little base, little thing for the player to stand on. So if you guys want to create your own as like this is where I stand to recreate that image, feel free to do so. If you want to just create a small little, I don't know, a small little like blue material or something that I know that as a player I stand here and that's the same camera shot, that's totally fine, and I can modify the instructions to include that, because in the instructions it says to move the one I provided in the scene for you, but with the new project template there's still some things that we haven't added yet. So basically what you want to turn in is both scenes together, right? So in the hierarchy here, this is just editing scenes, right? We're just making changes to multiple scenes. But you'll see in the build settings, right? Let me just remove these. The build settings, these include all of the scenes that are in the actual executable. So think about this as every single scene in your game, right? So you probably have your main menu scene, a credit scene, you have your level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every single scene in your game is loaded here in the build, but it's not loaded at the same time, okay? So you do need to include all of your settings here in the build settings. And again, just to reiterate with Perforce, I really like to come to Perforce and look, in your project settings, there's this thing called editor build settings .asset. When you're changing anything in this window, you're actually changing this file right here. So I'm going to go ahead and check this out. As well as I'm going to just check out my hub scene, because I'm going to make a change to it. So anytime I like to make a change, I like to come to Perforce and check out the file. It's a really good habit to just get yourself into. Nothing can ever go wrong in that if you take that workflow. So now with this scene, this setting window open, I'm just going to hit Add Open Scenes. And now it'll add my hub and my visual scene to it. Right? There's my two scenes in there. So the other thing you need to adjust, so that's the first thing, is the scenes in the build settings. The other thing is the ASCORE level manager. All right, so I select this. This is an asset in the hub scene itself. Let me go ahead and set this as active. So anytime you see something called level manager in a game or in a production environment, this most likely is just an empty game object that has some type of script or some function on it that is controlling something else, right? It's just no visual representation, but just an object with a script on it. And that's what ours is right here, is this level manager script. So in here, if you load the script and look at it, you'll see it's nothing fancy. It's just basically we're just checking here for string names and we're loading those scenes additively. So with the multi-scene editing came the switch to this new scene manager that Unity includes in their API. Right? So here, basically this line right here is scene manager.load scene, and here is that load scene mode. So additive means that we're going to load it in addition to the one that's already loaded, right? So here we're checking for a bunch of strings in the array itself. So we could change this to 5, right? Not 51. So basically what this is going to be is basically this is Bobby's level, Susie's level, you know, each student's level is going to be right here. But for now, you're just getting practice and just loading your own work with it. So here, you can't drag and drop. I can't just take the scene itself and drag it in there. You just have to type in the text. So IND2_visuals. Make sure it matches exactly. IND2_visuals. You can go ahead and just copy and paste it. Like find the scene in here and just copy and paste to make sure you get the name right. Right, just copy and paste that. But that needs to be saved in the level manager itself. Right, so there's my level manager. There's my visual scene. All right. Now with that done, I'm going to go ahead and save my scene and save the project. And now let me go ahead and make a build. So this is what you're going to do when you're actually ready to turn in the assignment. So build settings, make a build. All right, now it's asking me where do you want to put it, right? So don't just go ahead and throw it in your project. Remember, everything gets turned in to the compiled folder. So what we can do is go to compiled, and this is our visuals assignment. So I'm just going to open up this folder, and now I can create a new folder right in here. So I'm just going to call this last name, first name, and the name of the assignment. That's going to be the naming convention for all of the assignments. It's just last name, first name, and the name of it. And now I can hit open, and now it's asking me to name the executable. So I'm just going to say last name, first name, visuals, and then save. All right, this shouldn't take too long to build. Your scene itself isn't going to be huge, as well as the hub is pretty simple. And this should be a working executable with 2 scenes in it. So once this is done building, don't just go to Perforce and then mark for add and submit. You actually want to open it and test it before you submit anything. So any questions at all up to this point? Your scene isn't loading? Do you have 5.5? Yeah, so make sure everybody downloads Unity 5.5 to make sure you have the most recent version. Okay, I can help you right after this. So now that this window popped up, right, you have this data folder and your visuals. So if I run this, it's a good idea to actually test it to make sure both your scenes are included. Right, there's that scene, there's my other scene right there ready to go. Right, and they're seamlessly transitioning. There's no loading screen. They're just 2 scenes next to each other. So this data folder right here, it's important that you actually submit that to the depot. Without this data folder, the executable will not run. So you can't just turn in this exe without that data folder. So make sure, that's why I have you create that folder, is so everything is included in it. So once that's added, I'm going to go ahead and submit. And now that should be submitted to the compiled folder. So all of this will be archived and recorded if you want to refer back to it. So that is what you're